Hello and welcome to our Book Passage online conversation today. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. Today we are discussing Becoming Yourself. From the beloved author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, comes a new book of teachings on the essence of Zen practice. In this long-awaited book from one of the most influential spiritual teachers of the last century, Shunryū Suzuki Roshi shares simple, warm-hearted teachings on a practice that is fundamentally about becoming yourself. In his inimitable style filled with humor and insight, Becoming Yourself speaks directly to the newest beginners while also serving as a touchstone and a continual source of inspiration for even the most experienced practitioners and Zen teachers. This book unearths new jewels from the late Suzuki's lectures and brings to light many of his unpublished teachings. Naomi Shigad states that there could not be a better book for our moment in history. In the midst of national and international turmoil, it is still possible, if not utterly necessary, to learn the simplest things. And I have to say an amen to that, as I find myself daily looking for ways to sit with myself as the complications and frustrations of the world around us are coming at us. Every moment practically. Becoming yourself is not meant to be understood as an idea. It is meant to be tried out as a way of being. It is opening to your life wherever you are and finding right there a deep well of innate wisdom, compassion, and care. Jiryu Rutschman-Byler is a Soto Zen Buddhist priest and teacher in the lineage of Shunryū Suzuki Roshi, with Dharma transmission from Sojun Mel Weitzman. He has trained residentially in Zen temples since 1996 and currently serves as a co-abbot of San Francisco Zen Center through his role as abiding abbot of Green Gulch Farm Zen Center, an incredible place here in Marin County where we are broadcasting from. Shunryū Suzuki, he was the author of the seminal book of Zen in the West, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and the upcoming Becoming Yourself archive related to his teachings is available on the website. Ruth Ozeki is a novelist, filmmaker, and Zen Buddhist priest. She's the author of 4 novels, and we love all of them here at Book Passage. Her nonfiction work includes a memoir, The Face, a time code, and the documentary film, Having the Bones, a longtime Buddhist practitioner. She is affiliated with the Everyday Zen Foundation. Zoketsu Norman Fischer was ordained by Zen Tatsu Richard Baker in 1980 and received Shio Dharma transmission from Sojun Mel Weitzman in 1988. He practiced at San Francisco Zen Center for 25 years, serving as co-abbot from 1995 to 2000, when he founded the Everyday Zen Foundation, which he continues to lead. He is also an author and a poet. So thank you so much to our speakers and to those of you listening, and a very warm welcome.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Book Passage, and everybody logging in to be with us today to celebrate this incredible event of this launch of this new Suzuki Roshi book. It's been over 20 years since the last one, and I find myself amazed that I've been part of kind of birthing this offering from Suzuki Roshi, and here in a seat kind of to speak about Suzuki Roshi, to try to express his teaching to others, is rather overwhelming. This great, really generationally great teacher of Zen and figure that's been so important in Western Buddhism, and just this whole kind of turn towards, living awake and open and mindful and caring. So yeah, I knew this day was coming, that the book one day would be out. And I find myself quite overwhelmed today, and so grateful to have the support of these wonderful teachers, Norman and Ruth. Thank you really for being here to celebrate this book today. This morning I was listening to the audiobook, which Peter Coyote narrated, and at the end we have these clips of some of the chapters of Suzuki Roshi in his own voice, so you can sort of compare what Suzuki Roshi said, and then how we tried to refine it in the edited version. And I was just kind of overwhelmed, also feeling the presence and the loss of my co-editor and teacher Sojun Mel Weitzman. This whole project started with his idea. He was himself a disciple of Suzuki Roshi and a great student of his teachings. Really, Mel kind of had a hand in the various Suzuki Roshi book projects of the past, and really loved his teaching and felt that he really understood them. Whether he did or not, he really felt that way, and wanted others to understand them, wanted me as a student to understand them. And he had been sitting on various little snippets, pieces of longer talks or lectures that Suzuki Roshi had given, that he thought, someday we need to make another book. We should edit these and put them out there. But of course, excuse me, as I remember Norman has says, it's easy to have the idea, oh, this would make a good book. And it's kind of a long path to actually get there. So in about 2018, we sat down together, and Mel invited me into this project that had some stops and starts of sort of turning these couple of folders that he had of treasures from Suzuki Roshi into a next book. And what an amazing experience that was to work with him, to kind of sit side by side with him and look over this material together, trying to pull out these gems, from that mountain of Suzuki Roshi's teaching. Of course, the transcript, all Suzuki Roshi's talks are out there. The transcripts are all there, but if you try to read them, they're not so easy. It really does take a lot of work to kind of mine out these gems, and polish them. And then you see really what he was trying to say. So, and then to find, after the writing, with no idea really of what would come next, just this kind of devotion of opportunity of working with Mel and feeling Suzuki Roshi's teachings on meditation, and feeling the way that his teachings sort of bring me to life and connect me with my surroundings and connect me with my tender heart, without really thinking about, oh, we're just going to be a book and that's going to be a thing. There's going to be events like a book passage online event, and it's going to be kind of a headache. And that to find that there's this interest, or does anybody care about Suzuki Roshi? Does anybody care about Suzuki Roshi anymore? Is this just kind of us being nostalgic for this great teacher from the 1960s? The incredible thing about going over this book and then feeling this great interest from this wonderful publisher, Tarcher, Penguin Random House, and all of their support, and this international support, this kind of like people saying Suzuki Roshi matters. There's kind of international deals now in 12 countries already. We have 11 translations. So just this sense of kind of like Naomi said, this is a time when everything seems like it may be falling apart or uncertain. Where's the ground? Where's the ground of our life? And then what's the moral center? What's our moral guide? And that's kind of a key piece of this book. It's not the only thing the book is about, but a good chunk of this book is about sort of how do we find our loving heart, really? How do we have kind of moral, ethical direction in the world? It really needs that desperately. But to rely on dogma and ideology and all kinds of ideas about right and wrong doesn't seem like is going so well, So Suzuki Roshi and Mel wanting us to see Suzuki Roshi's teaching of morality, of precepts, that there is this meditation path of becoming ourselves, of just sitting as ourselves, is also a path of really being in harmony with each other and really living for the benefit of each other. And we don't need to do that by carrying around ideas about good and bad and what others should be doing, but by doing this practice and embodying this practice of intimacy with what's here. So feeling that, these themes are still totally relevant. They were relevant in 1250 and in 1950 and in, 450 BC, and they're relevant today. And people, are continuing to drink of these teachings. And I think now, this theme, maybe just briefly, this theme of becoming yourself, this invitation to just be yourself. What a wonderful way to frame the spiritual path. Wonderful frame for what meditation practice is, what maybe you could say religious practice is, what we want to mature into is just to fully be ourselves, just to be ourselves, and that when we feel held in life, supported by our breath, by our body, intimate with the surroundings, then I can just be myself. I can just be myself, and I don't know what that is, but it's not separate from other people. It's not a burden. It's not something I'm carrying. So this kind of inexhaustible theme, or teaching of just being yourself fully. What is that? And he keeps turning it. Suzuki Roshi, you can't get a fixed idea about what yourself is. He's always turning it. Oh, if you're really yourself, it's including everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really yourself, you're in harmony with everyone. All this, you can't kind of land somewhere and say, okay, I got it. I know how to be myself. Just what we mean when we say this, a process or a path. So anyway, I could go on, and I'm going to have lots of chances, the next month or so is me going, from my perspective, going around to various places and just sharing my enthusiasm for this book and sharing some of the chapters. A couple people specifically who read advanced copies, have reached out to me and said, like, this book, you open it and you come across a line, and then you just kind of like have to stop, you get to the next line and realize the next line is just as deep, it's just all of these. I remember we did a project, a great artist did a project celebrating, I think it was the 50th anniversary of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and put all of these, gathered from all of these meditators, their copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind with highlighted pages, and notes on the side. And so they did this kind of Xerox art thing of everybody's highlights, and annotations of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And it's just covered, it's covered because every line is just as well. Something about Suzuki Roshi's teaching so simple and so deep, and you just keep coming back to it. So I almost feel like any of these lines, any of these chapters are just bottomless, So I really could go on. And what's really special for me and really just so nourishing and inspiring and humbling today to have Norman and Ruth here. So I don't want to hog the mic, but really would love to hear from Ruth and Norman, about your relationship with Suzuki Roshi's teaching, what that's meant to you in your life, maybe how you encountered that and how that's moved in your life. And then very grateful for both of you kind of reviewing the book early. And I wonder if this, from becoming yourself, if there's parts that have stood out or have been inspiring to you. So maybe Ruth, I don't know if you could share some thoughts.
Sure, of course. Thank you for giving us that background, Jiryu. I'm so curious. I have so many questions about what it was like to to do all of that very hard work of finding and distilling and clarifying the passages that you've selected. So I hope that you have time to talk more about that. One of the things that first struck me about the book was that, I mean, as you pointed out, the title, and when I was thinking about my own relationship with Suzuki Roshi's teachings over the years, it sort of hit me that that probably most of my life I've been trying to become something other than myself, and so much of my sort of growth and development has been motivated by this idea that whatever it is that's here is not sufficient, and so therefore I need to sort of look outward and try to become something else, and so that weird sense of othering myself has been sort of part of my development, I think, and that's really kind of reflected in my relationship with Suzuki Roshi's teachings, because I think I first encountered Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It must have been shortly after it was published in like 1971 or 1972. I can't remember, but I was still a kid. I was like 15 or 16 years old. And even then, I was a spiritual seeker. I was, reading Hermann Hesse and doing transcendental meditation and doing yoga and, all of these things. And at the same time, I was kind of, to go back to this idea of the self, I was really trying to understand, who I was and what this identity was, and being a mixed race person in the 60s and 70s. I felt in a way I had a bit of a leg up because everybody knew that like Asian people were spiritual, right? And so, I thought I kind of had an advantage because my mother was Japanese. And so when somebody gave me a copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, I don't remember who it was, but it was clearly somebody who was older than me and somebody that I wanted to impress. They probably gave it to me because I was Japanese, right?
Mm.
And I was really excited because, here was this book that was written by, a real Japanese spiritual teacher. And I remember feeling a sense of, I don't know whether it was recognition or whether it was just wishful thinking, but in any case, a kind of sense that, oh, this is what I need, right? The problem was, I mean, I didn't know anything about Japan at the time. I didn't speak Japanese. The only Japanese person I knew was my mom. So I approached Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, very much the way any American outsider, outsider to Zen, outsider to Japanese culture would approach it. And I remember this feeling of kind of confusion and disappointment because it didn't speak to me the way that I had, hoped and projected upon it, right? I didn't really understand it. People, seemed to think it was terribly profound. So what was it that I was missing? I felt that I should understand it because, I'm half Japanese and this is part of my heritage. Um, and I think I probably pretended to understand it more than I did, choosing, sort of key phrases and lines and sort of quoting them in a koan-like knowledgeable way. Because this was part of my heritage. And I felt that, that I was kind of disappointed in myself because I didn't understand it. I was feeling kind of deficient, and fraudulent. So that was my first encounter with it, which was a kind of fraught encounter. And then years later, after I started studying Buddhism, I first started practicing in a Tibetan tradition. And I had lived in Japan by then, and I read Japanese, and I came across Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, but coming at it sort of through a Tibetan lens. And I remember at that point too, feeling like, wow, this Zen stuff it's a little bit kind of vague and confusing, and it doesn't have that kind of, that kind of logic, in that you find in the, in the Tibetan tradition. And so again, I kind of had this feeling of like, wow, this is my tradition, but still not really getting it, right? And then, the next encounter would have been through Norman, practicing with Norman, and really starting to read and study Dogen. And at the time, I was working on A Tale for the Time Being, which has a lot of Zen, has Zen characters and Zen components in it. And I think it was then, for the first time, that I was really able to start to appreciate what it was that Suzuki Roshi was teaching, because behind the English, behind the the language, I was starting to see the kind of shapes and contours of Dogen's teachings, and was able to really start to appreciate how Suzuki Roshi was taking these old teachings, and teachings that are also very confusing, right? And being able to kind of distill them and translate them into a way that modern Americans could kind of understand. And so anyway, these this kind of series and this evolving relationship with the teachings was interesting, and I realized that it sort of paralleled that as I'm finding myself, right, I'm also sort of finding Suzuki Roshi at the same time. So it's like, through these various, the evolution of these various selves, Suzuki Roshi kept changing, for me. And so, so that was kind of an interesting way to sort of look and re-experience my understanding of the teachings. And then you mentioned in the audiobook, which I think is so wonderful, that there are going to be audio clips of Suzuki Roshi's talks. And it was really when I saw a video clip, I started seeing video clips of Suzuki Roshi online. Again, that sense of real recognition came back to me. I never met him, obviously, face to face, but seeing him on film as he talked and listening to his voice and his intonation, he just seemed so familiar to me. It was like seeing my grandfather. And so that sense of recognition was kind of finally made complete when I started when I started to see and hear the just images of him actually speaking. So it's been a long evolving process, but yeah, I'm grateful to him, and grateful for to him for being so patient with me.
Just sitting there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. I had a friend who also had a similar experience of seeing the video clip, and her feeling was, when you see it kind of in the black and white text, it seems like he really means it, or like it's a solid, like this is the statement, of truth. And then sometimes he's saying things that are maybe strange or whatever, but you think, well, this is really deep and serious. But then you hear him talking, and it's just, there's so much spaciousness and air and joy and light. It's kind of like he's in on the joke, and there's a section in the book where he's talking about one of his teachers, and it's kind of like, we didn't get the joke, but he was in on the joke because his Zazen practice was so deep. He wasn't holding anything too tightly. He was very sincere,
Yeah.
serious, but also there was just, that is kind of like not so serious, there's always this. So I say, you mentioned, what's this, how does this work, the editing, and one of these things, taking his words to black and white.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how do you not lose that, So Mel thought, well, we could keep in the things that say laughs, because in the transcripts it says that when everybody laughs, when he laughs, and it changes the feeling a lot. Just like hearing him, seeing him, you see him laughing, everybody's laughing, and he's saying, you really shouldn't do it that way or whatever. And then he's laughing and everybody's laughing, and you see, oh, he's not like actually scolding anybody. He's appreciating that we're ourselves, that kind of feeling. So we couldn't keep all those things. So sometimes I'd like try to put in an exclamation point or something, to get the picture, like this isn't what you think it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, wonderful to feel his presence and feel that, to feel him move with you. That's part of kind of the depth and simplicity and openness of these teachings. Like it keeps unfolding as we grow. This is why people say, 50 years, just going back again and again. Every few years, read Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's a whole new book. I've been so close to this book, and then still I'm reading it and say, wow, I never thought of that. That's a really good point, Yeah. So thanks for sharing your experience there.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, it's great to be here with you two guys, because we're like family, right?
Yeah.
Jiryu and I had the same teacher, and Jiryu was college pals with one of our sons, and that's how I know Jiryu a long, long time. And Ruth and I have practiced Zen together forever. And it's I mention that because there is a kind of family feeling about Suzuki Roshi. It's as if he was talking to family members, not formal Zen students, but kids that he really enjoyed, who were living together like a family, and there is that informal feeling of people who know each other well and accept each other with all their foibles, and the study happens in that context. So I think that's what's unique and kind of wonderful about Suzuki Roshi's voice. Just to say a couple of things that I found in the book that are different from the other collections that are really valuable. One is, Jiryu, you mentioned this. I'm pretty sure, although Suzuki Roshi often mentioned the word precepts and talks about precepts and what precepts really are, this book actually has a section where he talks about the 16 Bodhisattva precepts and discusses several of them individually. And it's very interesting, because when Zen Mind Beginner's Mind came out a long, long time ago, 50 years, 60 years ago by now, the question of precepts was not at the front and center of what Zen students were interested in. They were interested in enlightenment and experience and meditation. But now, in all the Zen centers that I'm aware of, precepts are really, really important, because a moral center, and again, Jiryu was saying this, that we really need a moral center now, and we really need a kind of way of life. And this is not about do and don't and right and wrong, but it's about how do you live. So now it's very standard that spiritual groups, Zen groups, have precept study groups, and taking the precepts formally, which we used to do without even knowing what we were doing. We just did it without any discussion at all. Now there's lots of discussion and study. So that section on the precepts is really valuable, going to be really valuable for all the precept study classes all around the country and the world. to hear Suzuki Roshi's extended discussion by Suzuki Roshi on it. And the other thing that's in this book that I don't think is in any of the other books is that section, or a couple sections by Okusan, Suzuki Roshi's wife, and by Suzuki Roshi himself, on his early years and his some of his feelings about his teacher and so on. It's really kind of their presence in their lives is completely evoked by those short passages, and those are really wonderful. I really enjoyed those a lot, and they're, like I say, unique in the Suzuki Roshi literature, I think. I mean, Crooked Cucumber tells you all about his life, but it's told as a narrative, and this is now told in his voice. So that's what's really great. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, I've been reading off and on my entire life. I don't even know when I first saw it or when I first started reading it. It's so long ago, I can't remember. But every time I would go back and read it again, I would be amazed because it had this funny quality. I could never understand what he was talking about. And it seemed like so familiar and so persuasive, like, yes, this is absolutely right. Of course, this is so right. What is he saying exactly? So I kept having that experience of going back to it and finding it so attractive and so hard to understand. And then little by little, I think I understood it better, and I kind of got to know him better, because I didn't know him either in life, but through the reading of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and of course through studying with so many of his disciples, I got to know him better and got to know the book better. And I got to where I kind of felt like I was on the same page as him. And it's such an uncanny thing that he writes so simply and in a way incomprehensibly at the same time. He's not saying anything fancy or anything complicated. It's really simple. And yet at the same time, you stop and you say, what exactly is he saying? And over the years, I came to realize that more or less, he is really, I don't think there's anything in his teachings that is not Dogen's teaching. I think he's really just a faithful student of Dogen, expressing in such a clear and straightforward way what Dogen is saying. And when you read Dogen, of course, Dogen is famously difficult to read and so on and so forth, and also very, very pious, constantly, quoting the scriptures and having a tone of voice can be a little off-putting if you're not already used to Buddhism. Suzuki Roshi doesn't do any of that. He's not hard to understand. He's not pious at all. And yet, in his way, he is telling you exactly what Dogen is saying. He's giving you the essence of Dogen's teaching, not only the essence, but the details in every way. And it's sort of remarkable how he pulls that off. I mean, the only way he could do it was without trying to do it, but just responding to the people who were in front of him. And you could tell, when you knew that all the people who were in the audience in the days that he was giving these talks, as I did, you knew that he was really talking to them and talking to their shortcomings and their needs and their lack of understanding, or understanding too much, and taking away something they were understanding. You can really hear him talking to those particular people. And we're still reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Right now at Everyday Zen, there's a class going on in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Not the first and not the last. And now I'm kind of excited. We'll be having classes in this new book, right? We'll be using this new book for themes for our practice periods and so on into the future. But right now, the class that's going on, I just listened to the talk of one of our priests who was giving a talk on Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and he chose a passage called, I think the title of it is something like Beyond Consciousness. And he said it was the word consciousness that attracted him to the passage, because he said, I'm so unconscious, I'm always crashing around and, not being mindful and dropping things. And my wife is always complaining to me about how unmindful I am. What's wrong with you? You're supposed to be a Buddhist. You're so unmindful. So I wanted to read this so I could be more mindful. So he starts reading this. And Suzuki Roshi says, well, our practice has nothing to do with being mindful or being enlightened or anything like that. He said, our practice is about beyond consciousness. It's about all the things we don't know and never will know and cannot know. To situate ourselves in that is to practice our way beyond consciousness. And my friend is like, whoa. So that's Suzuki Roshi's mindfulness, beyond consciousness, beyond mindfulness, non-mind, no mind, true mind. So one last little piece. The part that I really wanted to read is one paragraph. It's exactly what you were talking about a minute ago, Jiryu, about humor, because this strikes me so true. I mean, more or less, how can I put this? It's like life is actually very, very funny. Because everything is so full of irony. We say all these things and we really mean them, and we have no idea what we're talking about. We look at the world, and the world is going on, and we take it all so seriously, but it's completely upside down and absurd. The things that people do with a straight face as if they make sense really don't make any sense. So I think that to practice is to realize how comical life is. And even life and death is very comical and weird and strange. So here's the section you call humor. And here's the first paragraph. Zen masters have some humorous elements in their lives. And after their deaths, we may understand even better how funny they were. What? After their deaths, we may understand even better how funny they were. They can be humorous because they have an understanding that is more than real. Their humor is more real than reality. Reality is not so real. What? Reality is not so real. If you see a comic, that could be more real than the actual event. I think that because Zen masters have something real, they can always be funny. When they say something ordinary, in their mind, they are always expressing it as if they are drawing on something comical. For them, it is comical. But for us, it is a very real and serious thing. He then goes on, I'm not going to read it, but he then goes on to talk about his teacher and how comical he was. And there's nothing at all funny in anything that he writes about his teacher and how comical he was. So that's the funny part about this whole passage. You can't tell what is funny about this. There's nothing funny about it at all. And yet you're left pondering this. What is comical and what is more real than real? What does he mean by more real than real? Anyway, what a great book and what a wonderful teacher. It's sort of inexhaustible. And aren't we lucky to have stumbled into this great way of being in life and looking at life together and doing it together. It's great. So I said the other day, Jiryu, at my Dharma talk, I think that our teacher would be very happy, actually, to know that he is gone flying around somewhere else. And you are left here holding the bag and having to do this on your own. I think he would be he would be chuckling about that and very happy about it, that he's not holding you back from being able to present this new Suzuki Roshi book as a member of another generation to a new generation. I think he would be really, really pleased about that. And I am too. So
thanks, Norman.
Congratulations. It's a great job. It's a great job.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Your support means so much to me. And I think of Mal, and I love what you just said about, everything from both of you, but this, Suzuki Roshi is so simple and straightforward and deep. And it's kind of like Mel also was that way, So I mean, Suzuki Roshi saying things like, "To be yourself is the purpose of our practice and is the way to keep Buddha's ethical precepts," or our practice of sitting is just for you to be yourself. So I take that and I'm asking like you, Norman, well, what does he mean? So then I tell some whole story. So I have now, countless Dharma talks where I explain that to you, explain like what, just to sit as yourself. What is our zazen? What is our meditation practice? It's just to sit there being yourself. So I can't stand how pure that is, how simple and deep. So then I have a whole story that I tell, it's like these different dimensions about what is this, what is it being yourself and what it's not. And that's the other thing I'm really worried about, that somebody's going to understand it the wrong way. He's not worried about that at all. Someone just says, already somebody is quoting this book to me saying, well, is that true what Suzuki Roshi said? He said, when you just sit, you can't be angry. So this worried this person, like, okay, well, I'm kind of angry and I'm just sitting. I don't know what Suzuki Roshi meant. He just said, it just means when you just sit, you can't be angry. I can't explain that to you, but it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that he meant it, and you can't be angry because you're sitting in some kind of like linear way. It's deeper. So it was the same as my experience with my teacher, Mel, and part of what I learned sitting next to him working on this book is I want to explain everything. And Suzuki Roshi is leaving it very open. What do you mean just to sit as yourself? Oh, I mean, you just to sit as yourself. Whereas I give the hour and a half Dharma talk, and Mel I would tell my understanding to Mel, and he'd kind of like, he was just kind of bored by me, sort of shake his head like, why are you making it so, why are you explaining it, So that, and then it's really deep, and we don't know what it is. It's always a little bit more open and more deep, and because our ideas, here I go explaining, but it's because our ideas, we're holding on to our ideas and not touching into this kind of presence, this kind of intimacy with our life that he's talking about.
Yeah, there is a simplicity to Suzuki Roshi's teaching, and there was a great simplicity to Mel, the way he practiced and the way he was as a person. It was very straightforward and simple. Yeah.
I'm thinking too, though, about how these are collections of talks, and Suzuki Roshi wasn't writing. And so his, the talks are necessarily, as Norman pointed out, relational, in that he was addressing very specific people at a very specific time in the world. And so then to sort of put that down, as you said, Jiryu, in black and white, in a sort of static, fixed form, that doesn't include that context. It doesn't include the laughter. I mean, that's a real challenge. And so, I can imagine during that, when you look at his Dharma talks, you get such a sense of that, of the presence of that moment. But it's very difficult to make that transition into print.
Yeah, there's a big, even, I've done lots of Dharma talks, and sometimes there's transcripts. And if I try to take that transcript and make it into a piece of writing, it doesn't work. Yeah, I can't just lightly edit it and make it into a piece of writing. So I've always been aware that all the Suzuki Roshi books, including this one, are truly collaborations between Suzuki Roshi and the editors of the books. Because it's not a one-to-one correspondence at all. And so that's why the editors could not ever have been editors per se, like a regular editor who was not a Dharma student and who was not a Dharma student in the Suzuki Roshi lineage, I don't think could have done any of these three books that we have now. It was, in every case, somebody who was a very close disciple, very embedded in and lifetime committed to the tradition and could write, that was able to do this. It couldn't have been done any other way, I don't think. And you wouldn't have gotten this kind of result. So that's an interesting thing, right? Very interesting difference between what Suzuki Roshi, because his talks were, as far, I actually haven't really looked at the videos or read a lot of the meandering talks, but the ones I read, like Jiryu said, they're very hard to read because he's meandering all over the place, and he goes here and he goes there, and it's hard to tell sometimes what he's getting at or where he's going, you know. So the idea that you could find the essence, take it out, and put it together in this way and polish it, and Jiryu mentioned, that's quite a bit to do. And so, and you know, you wouldn't do it without loving devotion. The only reason you do it, because it's so time consuming. You go over it over and over and over again. You do it out of love, and the love is in the 3 books are full of love. People who edited those books literally loved Suzuki Roshi. If whether they were Mel loving Suzuki Roshi, or Ed who loved Suzuki Roshi, or Trudy Dixon who loves Suzuki Roshi, and then through Mel Jiryu, that's what you're reading. You're reading the love and the skill and devotion of the editors collaborating with Suzuki Roshi's original impulse. So it's really quite something.
What kinds of challenges, I mean, Jiryu, what kinds of things during this process? I'm curious about, you know, you spoke a little bit about the humor, but I'm just wondering about other things that surprised you or that distressed you or that, you know, that posed a kind of real challenge in terms of, you know, taking something that's alive and, you know, setting it into black and white, into print.
Thank you. Yeah, there's, you know, part of what, so it's true, the transcripts themselves are pretty hard, and you can get the feeling like he doesn't even really know what he's talking about, or he's maybe not so prepared. But then as you start to, so the way that I can read them now, if you call it reading, is like I put the transcript in a Word document, and then I just start kind of putting the chainsaw to it, and then the, you know, sanding it down and moving it around, and then you can see, okay, it really does feel like polishing, you know. He also, because he's meandering, because he's talking to people, and because his English wasn't so good, and you kind of feel the difference too from the earlier talks to the later talks, and kind of how his English is. So, but then you put it together, you know, you kind of move it around, take out a bunch of the redundancy and the you knows and the hesitations and the false starts, and then you see he really was prepared. And that's one of the things also that that his wife Mitsu Suzuki points out, you know, that he would prepare for these talks, you know. It seems just very spontaneous and connected, because it was, you know, he was very intimate with the people he was speaking to, but he put a lot of work into them. He really was trying to express something about Dogen, and it mattered to him, you know, that he was being true to that teaching. So then you see, oh, he's not just rambling, he actually has something that he's trying to say. So, you know, and that even though it was to people who were there, the teachings are for everybody, you know, and that's so like that they resonate for all of us, you know, even though they were given in a specific place, that they're not limited to that place. It's just truly these timeless teachings. So I'll just say one of the things that for me has kind of buffered my sort of shame. I couldn't have done this alone, you know. It was only Mel's confidence. Mel, as I said, was very confident in his understanding. A beautiful feature of, he wasn't arrogant exactly, but he was confident in his understanding. He felt like, Norman, you said, on the same page. I'm on the same page with my old teacher. I just am, you know. And so here's what he meant. And we could disagree, you know. He also, it's all a joke, you know, right, Mel, you understand. So we could hold that all lightly and laugh at our understanding. But he felt really like you could cut pretty deep, you know, like, oh, that's not what he meant, you know, or, you know, that paragraph should be somewhere else, or yeah, he meant to say it this way. And that's like a gamble, you know, that's a little bit of leap of faith. Like, are you sure this is sacred text? You know, this is like the words of our like sage founder, you know, but his sense of like, no, we actually need to work. We need to work this. We need to really need this to make it come through. So one of the things that felt important to me that is not also in any of the other books, you can find it, but you have to dig. So in this book, at the end, there's something called chapter sources, which just says, listen, each of these talks is kind of like, this is me and Mel's version of what Suzuki Roshi is saying. And we, you know, we have good authority. We are the inheritors of like his blood vein of Dharma. So we're not making it up. But this is our reading. And what he's actually saying is kind of different than this. And maybe sometimes it's even the opposite, you know, of how we did it. So if this chapter interests you, then look here in the chapter sources. There's
I didn't
different
catch
places
that. That's
online.
great.
Yeah. There's where you can just listen to the talk and hear where he laughs and hear how everyone else is laughing and feel the different nuance. Or you can look up the transcript, and then you can say, well, Mel and Jiryu got it wrong, and that's good. So for me, that helped me feel kind of like sort of fearless in the cutting, you know, like,
That's
sorry,
great.
Suzuki Roshi, but we had to do this. Yeah.
It's interesting because that could not have been done in the past. It's only now that you could
Yeah.
do that, right?
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I learned this morning, you know, when I was perusing the book, because I hadn't read this part before, it's really interesting, that part where he talks about his early upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about, you know, Meiji Buddhism, because he was born in 1904. So when he was a boy, you know, the Meiji Restoration was not that long in it going. And I got the impression from what he said, that, which I never thought of before, because, you know, you would have projected that he came to America with a very intact, clear sense of Buddhism that he was going to share with people. But that makes it clear that he felt that there was a fractured Buddhism that he was finding in Japan, because the Meiji had been anti-Buddhist and was trying to restore a national identity around Shintoism. And so he talks about how the Buddhist temples had been seized and handed over to the Shinto people, and that he was made fun of as a boy for his coming from a poor Buddhist temple family. And then he said, it took me a long time to give up my resentment against not only the people who were complaining about Buddhism, but also the Buddhists who he felt didn't have a kind of intact way of viewing Buddhism. So he really felt, at least what I got out of reading that passage, was that he felt a sense from early on that what was going on in Japan and the Buddhism that he was seeing around him was not right, and there must be a right Buddhism, and that he was not experiencing, and that he would come to America and try to find for himself and share in America something that was true and pure that he didn't see even at home, you know. So that's kind of something that I don't think I quite appreciated before reading it in this particular text at the end there. That's really interesting to me.
And then coming to, you know, the United States, where so many of the people drawn to his teaching back then when he was here and today have, you'd say, like a kind of problematic relationship with organized religion, you know, and are seeking kind of something else. And Suzuki Roshi had a problematic relationship with organized religion too.
Yeah, he did.
Just because he was ordained at the age of 13, you know, he had all of this baggage about Buddhism and was like, that's not, there's something beautiful at the bottom of this. He makes fun of Buddhism, you know, he says these things like, haha, that's a good system. This is a great system for me as a priest, not such a good system for you. You know, he's like always, he doesn't totally trust organized religion, and he sees that there's something so deep and beautiful and important about it. And so do I, you know, and probably so do you, and so do the people who pick up his book. So I think that way, you know, he wasn't like kind of dogmatic, ideological. Kind of like, here's the true teaching.
And yet, you know, they always point out that when he came to America, he could have put on a suit, you know, and he was free to do that. But he decided that he would wear his robes all the time, and he did everything in a very conservative way, with a very open mind about it. But in terms of what he actually did, he was very faithful traditionally. And that's what made him so interesting in a way. You know, he was both completely iconoclastic and completely traditional at the same time.
Well, we really could go on and on. And I know we had promised to leave a little bit of time, and we've kind of swallowed it up here. But you know, if there are, Allison, some questions, or if you want to
Well,
add something.
I think everybody has been so fascinated by what you guys have to say that there's been some statements, not a ton of questions, but one person said, love seems to be the inspiration more than the accuracy of interpretation. And I thought that was an interesting statement that someone said. So I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Well, or that the love is the accurate thing.
Mm.
The accurate thing isn't the words, and Suzuki Roshi would say that too. The accurate thing is not getting the words right. The accurate thing is sharing the feeling that we have of being alive, not separate from each other. That's the actual precise thing that he's pointing to.
Yeah, I think that's a direct quote too. That's our practice is sharing the feeling together. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah. So I sort of have a personal question. I'm really struggling these days, and I'm one of those people who does have a hard time meditating, sitting with myself. And lately, I find that it's even more difficult because I'm trying to figure out how to deal with these feelings of anger and frustration at things going on in the world, things that appear wrong to me. And I would love more than anything to be able to just sit and sort of block that out. And so I guess I'm just wondering, what are some simple suggestions you have for a beginner who wants to do that? Maybe some things that that the book shares, or that you would have for someone who's just trying to learn to sit with herself.
Thank you. I'm happy to speak to that, or Norman and Ruth.
No,
So
Judy, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Part of what has been inspiring to me about his teaching in this book is this idea of including everything. So we want to be free of all the suffering, and turmoil. We think that the way to do that, and our own craziness, and we think the way to do that, as you said, is going to be to block out something. If I could just get rid of this feeling of pain and uncertainty and confusion or numbness or overwhelm or whatever it is, if I could just get rid of this feeling, then I could be present and I'd include everything, and it would be see the comedy and everything, and have this light, joyful, loving heart. I just got to get rid of this thing. So there's kind of this challenging opportunity to say, actually, can we include, can we welcome? And I notice that we're trying to actually cut something off, but that there really is room in our being when we're taking care of our body. So that's the basic thing, to be sitting or walking, feeling what it's like to be in our body. Suzuki Roshi talks a lot about the breath, taking care of the breath. He says, you don't take care of the breath. Don't follow the breath or concentrate on the breath in order to avoid your thinking mind. We think, oh, I want to get out rid of all this thinking. I'm going to focus on my breath. He says, no, we're just focusing on our breath to take care of the breath. We're just taking care of what's here. We're just appreciating the breath, appreciating the body, opening in a kind of direct way to the sights and the sounds around us. And then seeing, we don't have to block anything out. Can everything be, is there something I can include that's not included? Again and again, he's saying this. We already kind of include, it's already here, all of our angst is already here. We need to just like include it and allow it and welcome it. And then we find this kind of freedom that's like bigger than it. It's not that we figure out how to not have it. It's we figure out how to be bigger than it, kind of spacious, sort of like the sky, is kind of free and grounded, but not because it's shutting anything out.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
That's a lovely
question.
way to look at it. I really appreciate that personally. Thank you.
I don't know, Norman or Ruth, if you'd have anything to add for kind of practical question for beginner in the practice, how to apply these teachings.
Well, I was thinking more about one of the chapters that really stood out to me was the chapter called Buddha Nature. And this idea that, Suzuki Roshi says your true nature is beyond good or bad. And it's valuable because it is beyond good or bad. It's valuable because you can't figure out what it is. And that really spoke to me because, of course, I am always trying to figure out what everything is. And so just to sort of let that go. And also just to notice the way, and this, because you spoke earlier about the divisive quality of, life in America now. We are always framing everything as good or bad or good and evil, and he speaks directly to that in this chapter, and then distinguishes between, the small divisive mind that is always separating, me from you and us from them. And he speaks directly, to that small, the small mind of practice, the small mind, and then the big mind of practice, which is, I think what Jiddu is talking about when he talks about, all inclusiveness, but also it's also what we talk about when we think about the big mind of compassion, and I think that, just to be able to kind of sit with that and see the way that this small mind manifests, but to understand that there's a bigger way of thinking about it. There's a bigger way of holding that. And maybe that's where the comedy comes in.
It's lovely. Just listening to you both talk about it is sort of, I feel myself relaxing, and that's it. I can see how that this practice would be so beneficial.
Well, even if you didn't sit, you could just get your copy of Becoming Yourself, open it up
There you
to
go.
a page when you should try this. Let us know how it works. When your mind is raging and you're really upset about the world, just sit down, open up a copy of the book, open up the book at any random page, and read maybe 2 sentences. That's all, and see what happens.
I love that. Okay.
I bet you that would be just as good as an hour of meditation. I don't know, but you tell me, because I know, like, I study Dogen a lot, and I notice that happens to me when I study Dogen. Is I after about 5 minutes, my whole perspective is completely out the window, and I'm thinking about things totally differently, just because I put my mind there just for a few minutes. So and try that, and if it works, let us know, and we'll go on a new campaign of saying everybody can quit any other spiritual practice that they're doing and just read a couple pages of this. I think we got something. Yeah, I think we're in good shape. Yeah,
that's
but no, try it seriously. Try it and let me know. Let me know how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will definitely.
I think it might work. Yeah.
I think that's a perfect transition to thank you all so much for being here for this conversation. I'm sure people enjoyed it immensely who are watching, and it will be available to watch for people who weren't able to tune in today. And thank you for joining us from everywhere you were. And the book is available through Book Passage, so please contact us and order it. And we already have a lot of orders going, so we're really excited to continue to promote it. So thank you all so much, and thanks for your advice.
Allison, thanks so much.
We're full of advice.
I love it. All right.
Sometimes we even take it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so much,
hosting us.
Norman.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jiryu. Thank you.